I'm going over here, the export system. I'm in the middle of the Linux export, and I'm doing the flowcharts. This one is for the preset creation, and this one is for the export part. So there's the parts of the editor that creates the export configurations, which they save on the export presets config file. Then they use that file. The file is just to cache the state of the export preset classes, and they use that on this export pipeline, which is after you click the export project button, which is this flow that I'm going over right now. So the goal that I have here is to figure out, I think the thing is, I'm not really sure about what is the best way to go about doing this, but I'm trying to automate the process of exporting the project. So what I'm thinking about right now is just creating the flowchart there to see what functions are executed. Then I'm gonna copy these classes. I'm gonna copy the flow. Basically, the classes and the functions that are used based on the flow from the editor. And then I'm gonna put on the project that I have there, and I'm going to, after I copy everything, I'm gonna see, because I'm gonna have to change things based on the way that I'm doing there. So I'm probably gonna have to. This is the part that I'm not sure about because there's a lot of things in the beginning. And one thing that I think is kind of annoying is that based on the way that they did it is from they use inheritance to do it, which makes sense because of the build system. I made a video some time ago, or a live stream some time ago, explaining how it works. So, and I don't remember really well, but there is a file. Maybe I should try to search this file now. There's a file that they generate on build time that creates the classes based on each platform. So the folder that keeps track of or that has the logic for different platforms, I think is the platform folder. Yeah, this folder here. And then on every one of these subfolders, there's going to be code for the specific platform. There's probably this is related to these files for sure. So there is a file that they generate on the build. I think it is on the main. I was looking into this yesterday, I think. But I don't remember really well where it is at. There is a file that they use. Maybe it's just this one. No, it's a different one. They generate on the build time, and it's a function that they use on some rounds. And then on that function, they have entry point functions. They are going to initialize the class for each platform, which I think is the editor export platform. So they have a base class for like defining the structure of the functions that are used on the export system. And then they have the right classes for each platform that are gonna implement extra functionality depending on what platform it is. But I'm not really sure if I like that much. So I'm trying to think about whether or not I can simplify this. But I think that if I try to simplify right away, I just get stuck in process by analysis. So it's probably better. Yeah, is this function here? So this is one of the entry point functions. So what I'm thinking about doing first is copying the functions that they have there, and then trying to simplify, because the way that they do it, as far as I understand right now, is based on resource files. And the way that I'm thinking about doing is directly from C++, so I get the root node of the project. And this is the part that is going to be different, because they, based on the package files, or based on the scene files and resource files, they use functions from the editor file system to get the path of the files, and then they use those files to write to the executable. So either write to the executable or to a package file. But I think for most, I'm gonna focus just on the embed option. So write everything to the executable file, because I think it's a lot simpler. It's probably because I ignoring something here, maybe. It was on the main. Might be easier to just rewatch the stream that I did to explain this. I think the main stuff was mod splash. Yeah. Oh, it's because I'm copying the whole thing. It's just a name. Should be called somewhere. Yeah, that's weird. Like it should be finding somewhere else here. Maybe it's because I'm excluding these formats, but I don't think it makes sense for it should be anything to do with these formats. It should be a file that is generated. So the files that are generated, they use the pattern .gen, generated through the build time using scones. So maybe like it should have, I should have this file because I didn't do anything on this version. Oh. I think I'm just gonna look back on the stream, just if I can find. Probably doesn't even matter as well, this file, for what I'm trying to do. So I know for sure that the way that it works is based on the editor export files, and it works based on inheritance just like everything else. So there is a base class for the export system, or for the export configuration stuff. Then for each platform, there's going to be the derived class that has like additional logic. And then this class is used to create the states, which is basically the options that you see on the editor. Then with this class on the other platform class, it uses this state to determine what logic is going to happen when it's creating the final executable. But there is a file that is generated on build time that calls these functions for each platform that initialize the classes. But I think it probably doesn't matter that much. Ask ChatGPT. I think it should be probably on the platform folder somewhere. Even the roots, but because it wasn't this, it's a different kind of thing. It doesn't make sense to be on the Windows either. Yeah, but I don't like this style very much. So for the PC builds, I think I'm gonna focus on the beginning the PC builds for Windows and Linux mainly, because it's just a lot easier. The Linux builds doesn't seem very hard to make it happen. It's very similar to Windows. It's actually more simpler than Windows. And the Mac builds, it will probably require me, like in order to test if it's working or not, to create a virtual machine and then go through a bunch of stuff. And I think that it doesn't, like, it's not a priority right now. I think it's gonna be easier. Like first, focus on the stuff that I'm using. So Windows first, which is the OS that I'm using now. Then once I make the system happen, then I think about the other platforms, web, stuff like that. I just wanna close the loop for now. But this is basically the class that is going to be used for the final part, which is the one that I'm going over now. The step intro, step over. And both the Windows and the Linux are going to use this class here. So this class is the main class that has the logic for exporting for PC, which is the one that I'm going to focus on, I think. And this is basically the three functions that it uses to create the executable. And I'm gonna have to change this function, I think, to create the data. Because I'm trying to do it directly from the nodes, from the root node. And obviously I can do it. So maybe it's easier to do it for the scene first. So, because obviously I can save the scene. Just use package scene with the root nodes and then save somewhere else. And then just use the same functions. So this is one option. The other option is to copy this stuff. So both options, I think, is probably better on the baseline to copy everything. The other thing I'm not really sure about, and I was contemplating whether or not, like which path to go with, is the functions and classes. So like obviously I can go over the same approach that they did and use classes, but I was trying to think about whether or not it's worth it to try to do it with only functions instead. And I think like initially functions seem a lot better. I think it's probably better to make it based on functions and then to like just use a struct or something like that for the configurations for all platforms, and then just use these main functions here used for the exports. But the problem is that, and this is kind of the challenge, is that there's multiple different kinds of builds, and I can't really see right now for the other builds if that's going to be difficult later because the other builds require more stuff. I think like the Android build and all that you need to load some other stuff and it's more complicated to make it work. And I can't really test right now unless like I said, set up the other like for Android. I think you download some software on Windows which allows you to develop and you use Java to develop, which is very bad. But I did a course about that some time ago. So I kind of know like the roughly what you have to do to develop apps on Android. And I think it's probably gonna be something similar to Godot here. So I'm gonna have to like set up that system and like I don't care about that right now. So I'm not sure if I should take the risk and just do functions. Probably the way that I'm thinking is probably the best. So copy these functions initially on the stuff that I have there, then see what kind of stuff I can remove and how I can change everything overall to make it work on the project that I'm doing there. It's not this. This one I didn't understand the first time that I saw this, but now like it's a lot more clear on my mind. So they're basically using this vector here to use some operational system functions to write to the file, and because they're calling the function from the file, it's gonna use, depending on which operational system you're using, it's gonna use the functions to write to the actual file. So you write based on this thing here. It's basically just writing the data on this, I think. Yeah, so it gets the data from the file, writes to the vector. And there's some other part that is kind of confusing on that function there that saves the resources, which is something that I'm going to try to change as well. They pass a function pointer, try to save the function, and then they pass a struct through that function pointer. And the struct is the one that is gonna, so they create a temporary file, they put a file on the struct, and then that struct is gonna be used on the function callback, which is a pointer, function pointer. So the function pointer receives as an argument the struct from the other function, and then that struct has the temporary file, and then they use that temporary file to write the resources to that temporary file. And the only thing that changes if you have the embedded package selected is the path of the file. So if you don't have selected, it's going to save to another .package file. And if you have selected, then it's going to use the same path as the executable. And it's just going to know based on the position where to write the information. So basically this function here is going to depend on the operational system. So as a C function, I think that's going to read the file based on this and the length, which it gets from the buffer, from the file before. Yeah, so it gets the length here. Yeah, so this function here is the one that they pass as a callback, or as a function pointer. It's going to be used as a callback. And this part I don't like very much because it makes it very confusing to know what's happening. Because this callback function receives the other thing as a pointer. So it's this callback function here, which is going to be save whatever, save back, or whatever the name is. And yeah, it's receiving this, I think, as the data, which is the pointer. And this stuff here is going to be a struct that is passed, is this struct here that is passed through this function. And this struct here has this f, which is this temporary file that they create here. So they create a temporary file on a specific path, which is this cache directory. This path here, basically. And then they're going to write the information to the temporary file. And I think only after you create everything, then you write to the final executable, as far as I understand. So this destruct here with the file here is gonna be used on the callback function, which is this function here. So they pass this function pointer to this one. Then at some point, which is this point that I'm gonna go into now, they're gonna call this function from this one, passing this as an argument. So it holds the file here, and then they're gonna write to this file here. And that part is very confusing. So basically this user data here is that struct from the previous function that I just showed. It's gonna be this thing here, and this is gonna be the file, the temporary file from the other function. It's getting the position of the file here, and then at some point it's gonna use this as well, yeah, here. If I have encryption, but either way it's gonna store the data. So it's the same method from the other function, just calls the buffer functions from the file, and then it passes the data vector to read or write to the file. And this data here is gonna be the data from that you're trying to save on the file, which comes from the other function as well. So this thing here comes from here. Is the third argument, so it's gonna be this, which is this. So this transforms, reads the file or gets the bytes from the path, the export path, puts it on the array. Then on this function is gonna basically write this vector to the file using that store buffer. So it's writing the information to the temporary file, basically. And this is a sing. So it's gonna do this for all the resources. So this is the main part, is gonna be different. And I'm not really sure how I'm gonna do this. So like, yeah, one option would be to save the sing first and then just do the same thing. But the thing that is kind of annoying is that based on the way that they did it, they assume a project, which is not the way that I wanna do. So like they use the editor file system, which is another class they have created to show the files. It's basically the backend, the server, to display the files on the editor. They use that file to get the paths, and I think to get resource information. So like the export system relies on the project existing on the editor, and I don't want to do like that. So the way that I want to do, I think it's going to be kind of annoying if I have to save the... I can't save, I basically just need to find or create a path there. But I think it might be better. Obviously, I'm not really sure, but it's probably better to figure out how to create from the only C++ first, then maybe later try to do the sing file. Like I would have to create another folder here and then call it like project. Yeah, but then it wouldn't work because I would need another folder and it would be just very annoying. So I can create a folder that would have the folders for each project, but it feels kind of, it doesn't feel very good because then it requires all these unnecessary things, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Makes a lot more sense, but the biggest issue, I do think it makes sense to save the files at some point if I want to. But it's probably better to figure out how to save the files on another folder that doesn't have like any folder that I want instead of making a part of the system there, and then making the system based on C++. So in case I want to, I can create a CLI command that's gonna, so a command line tool command that's gonna allow me to create the resources for a project and put it on a specific path. But maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe I should create a folder. To create a folder, so just create the code to create a subfolder based on the project name. Then on the project name you put. But the thing is, I don't need all the other files, so it would be just the sing files, I think. Yeah, I guess this is the problem is because of the resources. So since I haven't done anything that takes resources, that's the thing that I'm not really sure about. Where I guess kind of complicated. Because like obviously it's kind of I don't wanna like have the resources multiple places. So like the same resource for every project. Let's say I use the same image for every project. It doesn't make sense to have like the copies of the images on the different projects. It makes sense to use only one, obviously, for all the projects. But then there are resources that are going to be specific to each project. So it creates this polarity, which creates this range of like how to optimize the system so that I don't have to put all the resource I don't have to build the system based on resource files being on a specific folder. That's what I want to avoid. And this is for padding, so I think depends. Uh, it doesn't seem that they are doing like they're taking the architecture into consideration here. I think they pad based on 16 bits, and it's just to align the rows of the file. So you just make sure there's a module there to make sure that the next information that is going to be written is aligned on the file. So maybe I think I'm just gonna skip this stuff and I should probably copy things and then start trying to change. That's probably what I should do. I'm gonna skip this stuff. So I think it's gonna go over all the is either plugins or files. I think it's gonna go over the paths, yeah. So it gets the paths before based on this. So based on the editor export preset class, which is this is the base class, and for each platform is gonna have a derived class that's gonna set the state based on whatever options you put there on the editor for the exports. So if you set the flag to export all resources, which is the one by default, I think, then it's just going to use the editor file system to get the paths based on the project. And this is the part that I mean that I'm going to have to change, I think. So it's basically getting the file paths for all the resources the project uses and putting on this paths hash set here. Then it loops over that's this hash set, and then it's going to call the callback function, which is going to write the information to the file based on this flow. So my stuff, I think that probably I have to figure out. The idea that I had initially is just traverse this thing. Or traverse the root node. Then use the class DB functions to get the information for the file. So I need to clarify what questions to ask. Like what does it mean to save the resources that it needs there? Because obviously I don't want to use the editor file system. Also, let me see if so it is not very complicated, to be honest. It's a lot easier. But I think that's what's happening as well is that because I spend a lot of time on this, it's a lot easier for me now to know everything. So I do remember in the beginning was very confusing. I think after you spend so much time studying like different classes, obviously like I memorize a bunch of stuff. Like I already know a bunch of other classes and what they do, so I don't have to. So it frees up space to understand the big picture more. And it is very simple, I think, now at least. I think the main part that is annoying is the inheritance. So how to convert from, whether or not I should convert from inheritance to this approach, which I think I should, because the way that I'm thinking about is that it probably makes like I want to build a system where I have like predefined presets that I know that I'm gonna use for all projects that like are standards. Because I imagine that it doesn't matter that much. Like after you figure out the best configuration to exports and to like have the final executable, then it doesn't matter that much. Like you're never not gonna use the things. So I think the initial part is just figuring out what is those values for all the platforms. Then once you have that, you like I'm not gonna have not gonna need to do more things. So it doesn't make sense to. I think it makes more sense to have like a centralized place where I have the states of all possible configurations for all possible platforms, and then create different functions based on what platform it is, maybe. So the question, there are several different questions. It's kind of tough to. The hardest part is figuring out how to do things having in mind the bigger picture. So the problem is like if I do the system based on Windows, which is the one that I'm gonna use, and then later, because I assume that I'm probably gonna do like I'm gonna try to export for Android and for the web and for Mac as well. Uh, the main ones are obviously Linux and Windows, which I'm definitely gonna do. But I want to be careful to not create the system in a way that if I want to export to the other ones later, it's gonna be very annoying. And there is a lot of code here, even though it's simple, the flow. There's a lot of other stuff involved. So I think there's two main things. I think three, but there's two main things that are very hard, that are indirect to this, that are gonna determine the design. So one's gonna be the assets, and the other one is projects with multiple scenes. Because the problem for me is that I didn't there so far I didn't do any projects that have this. I think projects with multiple scenes is just the server that is gonna change. So you call a function from somewhere on the main scene on one of the nodes, one of the classes, that is gonna call the server or do something with the server, I think, that changes the route. So you use the scene tree to change the route. But then from the perspective of the whole project, how the project is created, the question that I have is like, because they do everything based on resources, I think it makes it easier because each scene is going to be a resource, and then you just write the information to the executable from the scene files. But if you're building everything from nodes, then like if I build only the root node for the thing there, which is what I'm doing. So you build the root node from C++, and I traverse the root nodes, will it get the whole project if it is more than one? But I think that I can just create extra, like if it doesn't capture the other ones, I can just make sure that I put the logic to get the other nodes as well. So the question I think is like how to translate, what is the best way to translate the nodes? And this goes right into the assets as well. Because the only assets that I use so far that I did something are the icons. So what's the question here? Is how is it related? Yeah, how to extract the assets? I think the main one is this one because it's going to encapsulate the other one. So I think that's basically the main thing that I have to figure out. I have to translate the nodes directly into the final executable. That's the thing. And then this one would be like how to know all assets used by the scene and put them on executable. So obviously the other one is that I'm going to use a different base engine. So the way that the normal exports work is you compile the engine before, and then you put on the app data path. There's a predetermined path that they use to use the templates. So the template is just the base engine executable compiled with the target equals release or equals debug if you want to debug. So you compile the engine with the target equals release. Then you put on this specified folder that they're going to search for on the logic here. And then they're going to use that as the base executable. And then they're going to basically manually write the other information, which is the information for the resources on that executable. So it's as if the engine is running with when you run that executable, there's going to be logic on the main setup function that is going to search for the additional information on the executable itself. I still don't understand very well how they do this. Maybe I should spend some time now as well trying to figure this out, because it's going to be on the global's main setup, or the global setup. Globals is just the project settings, I think, on the main SPP. I think it's global. The globals. Yes, this function here basically. This is the place where I'm gonna put a breakpoints here. This is where they are going to search for the thing. So one thing that I can test as well is after I export this, I'm gonna go over the export pipeline. I'm gonna export for Windows again. Then after I go this, I'm gonna get the path of the Because I'm putting on this here, which is the project folder. So I'm gonna get the path for the final executable, and I'm gonna see if I can debug with VS Code, which I think I probably won't be able unless I build. I think if I do it with the debug build, I'm probably gonna be able to. Because the debug build, I think the main difference is the symbols. So symbols allow you to go over with the debugger. So I think if you use the template for the debug build, then you are gonna be able to go over with the debugger on VS Code. So I think that's what I'm gonna do. So I export for because I want to go over the logic to see how are they checking, how are they getting the information from the as the executable is running, how do they know that it is on that process? If it, because that's how they're gonna determine whether or not their game is running or is something else. Yeah, so I think it is on this folder. So it's basically app data, roaming, Godot. And I think it is here, yeah. So it's export templates and it's based on version. There is some file there that I think is on one of the main files on the root that is gonna have a macro that determines the version, and then they have logic on the build system to create this stuff. But then it's gonna use one of these executables, which you can either I think you can either put this manually here or you can create through the GUI on the editor. But it's basically just a compiled version of the engine. So compile the engine with the flags. So maybe. Hmm. So let's skip this. So I think you're just gonna write this information using these functions on the temporary executable or temporary file that they create there. So I'm just gonna go over. There's gonna be. It's gonna be the same thing here. Just gonna go back. So this is after you wrote everything. So the information should be on this thing here. So I think that this is like save data. Yeah. So I think after each file that they save, they use this struct to keep the file, like keep track of the files, from what I remember. And then this is gonna have the data. Like I think it's basically like imagine you like the file is just gonna be a giant string. So like you're separating that giant string into chunks, and then you are to keep track of where the chunks are at. They're using this struct to keep track of the positions. So after each file that they write to the temporary file, they use this structure, get the information, then they push to this file OFs. Yeah, so this is the difference. So embedded package is gonna be like this is gonna be if you want to embed the resources on the executable. So it's true because it's not there on the thing, and if it's not, it's gonna save to a separate file. It's gonna be this. And this path here comes from the preset, if I remember correctly. Yeah, so presets get binary. Maybe no, I think it's this one. Yeah. Yeah, so this path comes from the path you put on the export configurations there, which is going to be the path to the final executable, I think. Let's see which arguments it is. 1, 2, 3, 4. It should be here. So I think it is this path. So it's going to use that path to get this file. So it's probably going to use this later. There. And this is based on, although this is from the other function. So if it is embedded, it changes. If it is not embedded, it changes should have the dot package to save on somewhere else. This just gets the name of the file without the dot x at the end, I think. So the main difference is gonna be When you're writing to the executable, you just moves the file to the end. This is kind of weird because it should be empty. Maybe this is the template path and not the final executable path. But I think it doesn't make sense to be the template. It has to be the final executable path. Yeah, this is kind of weird. I'm not pretty sure why they do this. Yeah, I'm not pretty sure because it's kind of hard to keep track of the. Because there's two main paths, I think. One of the paths is where the executable is going to be saved, which I think it is this path here, and the other path is going to be where the template is located, which is the app data path, which is going to be the base executable that they use to append the information. So I think that this path is the one for the final executable, but the thing that is weird is that's why they're going to the end, because this should be empty, I think. Or it shouldn't have any information unless it saved the information here, but then it's kind of weird because it is not passing here anything. And I do remember, obviously, like there's a place where they get the template path, but I don't remember where it is. I'm confusing the paths. I'm pretty sure that's also 6. I think this is gonna be a boolean. Yeah, it's not the same. That's probably later. Oh, this is for other types of files. Is if you wanna create a dynamic linker library or something like that, or if you're using DLLs, then it's gonna use this stuff. Oh, I think it's on the presets. Oh, that doesn't make sense. So maybe I probably missed something. It probably happens through this function here, the callback, I think. But I'm not really sure because like it's not using that anywhere. That's the thing. Doesn't make sense. Let's see if I go back. Yeah, this is the place. So on the prepare templates is going to find the export template, and this is going to be the app data path. So this should be the path to the one of these executables here. And it depends on the, yeah, so here is going to be based on the name of the architecture. So this is the thing that you put there on the options, on the presets. So it's basically building the name of this thing here. So it's based on this export presets, export debug. Express. How can I see if this is true? It is true. Yeah, so this is the part I think. So this path should be the one. Yeah. So now it makes sense. So when it prepares the template, it's gonna use this function here to copy the information from the template into the executable. That's why it goes to the end there, because this path here already has the base engine executable information on the file, because they use this function to copy from the template. So when it gets to this point here, it has, if it's not if the embed is not an option, then it's going to save on the other file, so it doesn't matter. So it doesn't do anything. But if you're going to put on the executable, then it's going to go to the end of the file because it already has information for the template, which is the base engine executable. And then it's going to write the information for the resources after using this other stuff here. So I think that the reason why it uses this stuff here is probably because on the system, when it loads the engine, it's gonna search for this stuff on the executable, I think. Like a file from the operational system point of view is just a bunch of bytes, just like everything else. So it's just a bunch of bytes that have extra information to determine the size of each thing and where the file starts and stuff like that. So it's basically like everything else. I think here they're just formatting the file. And then here they're gonna put, so they're writing down on the file how many resources it has. This might be very annoying actually. It might be just a lot easier to, because the thing is, but I kind of do. I was gonna say like I don't need to hold the. Maybe I can use like a temporary file thing, the same way that they do it. So instead of saving the scene on the project, I save on a temporary path somewhere, and then I use the dance as the resource. But I think that it might be like a double-edged sword thing. Like it might be easier in the beginning to do like this, but not worth it. So I should probably try to figure out how to do it from C++. The thing is like it might be better to try to do it so that I can use both approaches in case because I'm obviously not sure what's gonna happen, so maybe it's better to have the resources for the project, for each project, instead of building everything from C++ for whatever reason. And then if that's the case, then it would be good. It would be better if the system worked for files as well. It's gonna loop over the files. I think here is the place where it writes the information from the resources. Hmm. So it's getting the data here probably from the path. So I think I understand now. So it uses the main function there. It's gonna loop over. It's gonna use the editor file system to get the paths. Then from this point, it loops over paths, creates, uses resource function. Okay. Stores the info on the structs. It's gonna be save data and pack data. Oh, this export option here is the struct that they use to store the information from the preset configuration. So each one is gonna be on the beginning there. They use the add option function, I think, and they create this one that's gonna have these relative paths that they use later to get the information. So like architecture stuff like that. Then they use that to determine the flow of the export there. I should go before this, but so I think that is like it uses the temporary file. No, this comes from the path. So this is already the final file. This is interesting. So why? Trying to clarify the relationship between the temporary file Is this one and the final file there. I think it's just obviously for this main thing here. I think, yeah, it creates a temporary file in order to organize the information. I think I understand now. So they're creating this file here because this is going to be like the buffer that they use to create the save data structs. So before this, something that I'm not understanding very well, I think. I think like it's weird because it's not creating a file from this path here. So like how does the copy work? How does the copy function works here? Because I think that the template, so it got two paths. So I think that it's going to use those two paths to create two file constructs, and then it's just going to transfer the information. I think that's what's happening here, but I can't go manually because it's going to be the access windows. Maybe it is this one that uses this time. Yeah, so yeah, I think it is basically what I said. So it gets the following two paths, create two files constructs, then it's just gonna read one and then write to the other. Yeah, destination. So it reads, gets the buffer from one, stores on the other, based on this buffer size, which is the size of the file, and the limit, 64 kilobytes. I think I get it now. So all you need is the paths. Yeah, so I think I can't escape the because the information has to be on strings on the file. That's how they're gonna parse. So I think I have to create a sing, but I don't need to explicitly create a sing. I think probably the easiest path in the beginning is to get these functions as the baseline, then change them enough so I can use the node. I use the node, the root node of the sing, to create a sing file using package sing instead of saving to disk. Yeah, but the thing is, I need to save to disk. So maybe I should create a. The question that I have now, the main one, is whether or not to create a folder here to save each project. It might be the better idea because then I already have. I can use as. The problem is like I said before, I want to. If I use one resource for multiple different projects, it doesn't make sense to copy the resource over and over again. So I need to find a way to figure out what the line is. The thing is, I already know that I'm not gonna use a sing. I'm not gonna use a project. I think it makes more sense. I think probably on the beginning I should just make it as should just use this editor sandbox thing. But then I think I should figure out a way to. Yeah, so I'm gonna do like this. Start. Maybe I don't need the structs as well. Like maybe I can improve this as well. I think it's probably even. Yeah, I think I should try to remove everything actually. Because if you think about it, all that is happening is they're going over all the files and then they're using this struct to keep the boundary of the files. So if I do everything directly, then it doesn't matter because there is no files. So like it's all on one scene. And I can traverse the scene and translate the information for the scene into the file directly. So I can use the class DB functions, and then I don't need to translate I don't need this extra step of translating everything into the struct here, and then using this struct to put the information at the end. I think that's probably much better. So if I can figure out how to get the root node, as I traverse the root node, I use class DB functions or resource functions, and then I write everything directly into the maybe even the final file instead of using the temporary file. So the main question is how to translate. This is what I have to figure out. So I'm gonna do this now. I'm gonna keep going. I think that there is not gonna be a lot here because this is already the end. I think I already understand how it works. Obviously, there are a lot of details based on the configurations. I think in the beginning, I'm just gonna use the default one, the simple one there. And the other thing I have to figure out is the preset values, whether or not to use a class or a function. I think I'm probably gonna use a struct in the beginning. So convert the information for the presets on a struct, and then just change the names. So use one struct for all the preset configurations. Then use that struct. I think I do the struct initially, but then later I just replace the variables because, like I said, I think it makes a lot more sense to iterate and then find standard approach. It doesn't make sense to me that I'm gonna change the configurations a lot. Even if I do change, I can always create like a different standard as well. So I think that it makes more sense to make it fix the options of the presets. And then if I make it fix, it makes it a lot easier because I can just do the platform pipeline. So I have one function, one entry point function for each platform, and then export everything automatically. Well, the process that I'm gonna create there is more complicated, but I'm gonna do this in the beginning, so I don't get trapped on process by analysis. I think I'm gonna do everything assuming that I'm gonna embed in the final executable. I don't think it makes sense to put on the package file. I think putting on the executable makes more sense. So the other thing that I have to figure out, or that I have to clarify, obviously, is gonna be on the engine initialization because it's like a symmetry. So the way that they encode the information on the export system is directly correlated with the way that they're gonna parse that information when the engine is starting, because that's the code that is gonna run from the executable. So I have to figure out, because I'm probably gonna have to change that part as well. So maybe it's better to spend time on that part first, because if I build a system like this, and in order for me to be able to translate the information from the root node into the final executable, I need to know how they're gonna read the file when the engine is trying to run the application. I think that's what I should do. So I should probably export Windows debug version and see if I can go over. Because then clarifying this is gonna make it easier to structure this part here, because then I'm gonna know like how I should try to put the information on the file so that the engine understands. I'm just gonna skip this. I think after this function there is it's gonna export everything, or it's gonna be finish the export process. This one I don't understand here. So maybe there is additional information on here. So it's not only the structs that it uses here. It's gonna write some stuff on this file and some stuff on the initial one. I think, yeah, it writes here. So it does write on this file here. So it writes here and also puts the information on the structs. So I have to clarify that as well. Because there I'm pretty sure that it is using the information on the struct to write to the main file, exported executable file. So it looks like it's also gonna write from this one. And this is gonna be the main one there. Yeah, so it's writing directly into the file. to the file final file. So the question is, why do they use I'm gonna ask this to ChatGPT. So this is just padding to for the 64. I think it has to be 64 bits because of the architecture, and that's the way that the operating system is gonna work. But maybe like I think it doesn't matter because the other ones are gonna be multiple of 64 as well. So if you align for 64 bits, automatically aligns for the other ones as well. It's just formatting here. Maybe this is interesting. So based on the information there that they put on the header, so as far as I understand, they get the base engine executable binary on the file first. Then they extract all the information from the resources and from the sync files using the temporary file and the structs. Then after that, they write this headers, this padding and headers for the parts of the file that is going to be related to the resources. Then they write the resources, and then they're doing this because they wrote that padding in the header formats on the executable using those macros from the other function. They can use these values here to figure out where in the file the resources start. I think that's what's happening here. And then this is just gonna be like putting some additional metadata for to make sure that the all formats works, which is the file format. I think it's related to assembly from last time that I saw this, something related to this. It's probably related to assembly formats or something like that, or like binary to assembly, or assembly to binary. So I'm gonna put two stops here. Just see. I think this is just checking to see if the points where I stopped here is equal to this, because this is gonna be the start of the section, the package. Yeah. And you wrote this manually on the other function. Yes, I think that here is over pretty much. Yeah. So I believe the path is here and it's task, but it's for Linux, so it's not gonna work, I think. It's kind of weird that it doesn't have the executable here. Not sure if this is a problem. So I'm gonna quickly go over. So the export preset class is gonna determine this. It's gonna save the state for this information that shows up here that you can select. Yeah, I'm gonna go over very fast on this. Should get the final executable on Windows, and then I'm gonna see if I can go over with VS Code. And the thing that I found it weird is that the debug option there was true, but here, like this, as far as I understand, is for another stuff. So usually, I think if you have this marked, it's gonna export another, like on top of the executable, the final executable, is gonna export a console version. So as far as I understand, it's not like related to the, but I think it's probably based on configurations, how it selects the what template it's gonna use. Yeah, so I should probably see that first. So I'm pretty sure this is going to be the final path to the executable, but there is another one that is the path to the template. I think it's on the settings. I'm gonna ask ChatGPT. I'll be right back. When I'm back, I'm gonna find the templates. I'm gonna find how it sets the template path for the executable to see, because what I assume is happening is that I probably have the debug version, which is the one that I want, but I would just wanna know how does it get the path for the templates. But maybe it doesn't matter that much because I already know it's on that function there on C++. So I think I'm not gonna spend too much time on this, but I am gonna look for. Then I'm gonna go over very fast the export for Windows version to get the final executable for the Windows, the debug Windows, and I'm gonna try to go over with VS Code to see if I can step into and step over the global setup function to see how it's gonna get the information. But if I can't do that, I'm gonna go over manually to see, and then after I do that, I'm gonna copy the information that they use. I'm gonna copy as a baseline the functions that they use, following the schedule draw flowchart that I did there, and then I'm gonna see what things I need to change or to make my system work. So I'll be right back. but I think that ChatGPT is just hallucinating. I don't know if it's just me, but recently, like the outputs have been slightly worse than usual. Not sure if they changed anything, and it does feel kind of weird. It might be like my prompts or because it's the information that it has on memory that made it worse. So I think I'm gonna go over the export, and then once I go over, I'm going to stop on the prepare templates. Actually, I made a mistake because it has to be runnable. So if you don't click runnable, it's just gonna create a. Oh, that's the reason why it didn't create the executable on the other one. So it creates a dynamic link, or it creates a library or some other type of resource or something like this. So I think that's the reason why it didn't create the executable here. So if you want to create the final executables, you have to set as runnable. Yeah, so this is the one I think. So I'm gonna go over. 哦 it's set pressed to true by default. Export with debugging. So I'm just gonna go very fast. The main thing that I was trying to figure out is this debug only thing. It's weird because it doesn't have anything here. So maybe I should go over. How can I find this? I do remember, like the first time that I did this, there is something related to settings or something like this. I think maybe a better idea is to put platform here that I think I don't have the thing. Yeah, so it's gonna show information. Oh, but it's a different. So I do think that's probably on the settings. Yeah, so no, this is for the Windows executable that they use. So what does it do? I'm just gonna go. I'll see. I'll research this later again. I'm just gonna go over exports because I'm not really sure if it is building the only the debug version by default. I think that's what it means there. And it's kind of weird because there isn't any option here to set the debug. So like these ones, I think that's is if you want to use a custom engine executable. So if you change things and you compile, I think that's where it has to do with the settings. I think by default, Godot's gonna search for that for the executable on that path. There's something related to that. But if you want to use another executable, then you can put a custom path here. So I'm just gonna, I'll think about this later. Oh, it's the option there. I see now. So it's here, I think. Export with the debug. So it's on this thing. Yeah, but I'm gonna keep it like this. Hmm. Oh, it's a different path. So this one, I'm saving on a different place. Yeah. Yeah, I think this is the issue. Like, it's not gonna stop anywhere because it doesn't have the symbols, I think. Which makes sense. Hmm. It's also. Oh, I think this is happening is because the template version that I'm using doesn't have the classes that I built on the other one because it didn't update. Yeah, so let me think. So I think I'm gonna go over it manually. The maybe it's not because of the symbols. It might be because of the format of the executable. Like there is stuff on the on scones that, as far as I remember, on that construct that I think is related to this, but I didn't spend time studying it. It's very annoying this part. Because the thing that is kind of weird to me is that it doesn't make a lot. Like it must be the format of the executable because the only difference on the other ones is that I'm using the base engine executable instead of the final one. And the main difference between both is just that the other one's gonna have the data written through it. So the question is obviously like how does VS Code parse that? Or why does on this one it works? And I think it has to do with the way that it's gonna work under the hood, which is gonna be based on events and based on symbols, I think. It's like the build should be the same, that's the thing. And if it is the debug build, then it should have the symbols. So it must be because of something else that it can't put the breakpoints. It has to be because of the format of the executable, but I'm not really sure why the format fucks it up for VS Code debugger. But obviously, I think it is better that way because it makes it harder to reverse engineer. Yeah, so whatever. I'll think about this later. Is this one here? So they use this class here for when the package is, yeah, I think I understand. So this was one of the questions that I had. Is like when you have the resources embedded onto the executable, how does Godot, how is Godot going to know the paths for the classes that use paths and stuff like that use resources? So apparently they use this class here. This is kind of weird though. It's like, what if the class uses the make there function? I think if it has the make directory, it's probably gonna use the operational system. Yeah, I think that this class is just to like load assets and resources, but if you have a class that is going to deal with the file system, then it's still gonna use the access classes. This is just to unpack the resources. So it kind of creates like a virtual abstraction of a file system, a file directory for the thing using this packet data class, which this the access pack uses. I think it's just getting like it's splitting based on 16-bit rows, and this is what the number of sections is probably. So it looks for this pattern again. So it's the same thing that it did there on the end of the export pipeline, where it searches for this. So it seems that this string is the beginning of the resource stuff, based on the way that they write to the executable. So obviously, in this case, it's gonna return false because this is not a case where I have on the final executable the package data. So I think that's what I should do is to copy the functions now. Should copy the functions and then start. The main thing is how to translate the root node into the information in the same way that they write there. I think that's the main thing that I have to do. Then obviously I should do for Windows first so I can test. Then maybe later for Linux. Yeah, so I'm gonna copy I'm gonna go over this draw flowchart here. I'm gonna copy to the other projects. I think it's this thing. I'm gonna go over all these files and I'm going to try to extract what I think it matters for my stuff there. I'm gonna, the first thing is to find all the options and then create a struct based on all the options. Maybe I should copy all of the, I think I'm gonna do this, for the other ones I'm probably gonna do it off-string, but it's probably just gonna be the same thing here. I think that they have a plugin system and you just go on the platform, find the plugin, the export plugin, and then it's either gonna be this or the other one. Then I get the options that each one has, and obviously I can go over. I'm gonna go over with the editor and here as well. Then I just find all the options that are available, and I just translate into variables on on the struct that I'm gonna do there. So I have to think about how can I. Because I have to differentiate based on platforms. So obviously some of them have some options that the other ones don't have. So how can I encode the heuristic? What is the best way to do this? I think you should probably have like a predefined. Maybe you should do this now. Because the idea is to build everything at the same time. So I'm gonna use all the values anyway. And I'm gonna predetermine the values. I'll do the other ones off stream. So this is the base class. And so I assume that this is gonna be, it should be somewhere along this class here that they have the file that is generated at build time to initialize each platform. Because I think that, I assume since the classes are on the plugin for all the platforms, the export classes, that this is gonna be the place where they get the plugins and then they initialize here. I should probably make a list of all, maybe going to the header is easier. I think that this class doesn't matter that much. Maybe we should do a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet. And then, because obviously I don't want to repeat the variables from this, like, I think that the variables that are going to be common for the builds are going to be on this, and then the extra ones are going to depend on the classes. If I use the same variables for all of them, then I think I don't need to differentiate based on the platform, because the platform, like the difference is going to be on the platform pipeline. So I can have the same variables for all the platforms on the same struct. And then the main difference is that some of the exports are going to use all of them, and some are going to use some only a few of them. But then they're going to be the same for all of them. It's just going to be a standards thing. And then I can improve on this later if I want to. So I think I'm gonna do this off stream. I'm just gonna write down the values. So like obviously each one of these is gonna be for a variable, or I can just copy the variables there. So I think I'm gonna do a spreadsheet for them, and then I'm gonna go over, like I'm gonna write this down on the spreadsheet, and I'm gonna go over and compare with each platform if they have a different variable, and if they do, I write down and then write which platform it is from. Then once I have all of them, I just translate them into this struct here. Then I go over with the editor, I set the predefined values on this struct, and then I use this struct as the baseline for the other parts. And the other part is just going to be following the flowchart here as well. So I'm just going to go over this again, and then I think I'm not going to copy the files. I'm just going to go over the functions, then I create another file, copy the function, all the functions on the same file. And I'm going to try to create the most difficult part is going to be translating the root node. So that's the main thing that I have to do there. But I think I'm going to try to clarify first. So like instead of using the callback for the save data or whatever callback on one of these functions, I'm gonna use the function directly. I'm gonna just copy the functions initially and then remove like everything that I think I'm not gonna need that is related to resources, and change the arguments so that they receive the node and the project name. And then based on this, I'm probably gonna use the same. Like I can use a temporary file. At this part, I'm not really sure if I'm going to need that or not. Because like I said, I can if I figure out how to translate the information directly from the root of the project, the root node of the project, into writing to the final executable directly, then I don't need to do the other stuff. Can simplify a lot. And I'm gonna try to do that because I think it makes a lot more sense. So I have to see like how they are gonna differ as well on the export function. I think the main difference from what I've seen there is gonna be that Mac and Windows require or allow you to have the option for code signing and stuff like that. So on Windows, I didn't know this before, but they have systems where, like, if you're gonna develop drivers and stuff like that, you can acquire certificates and things like that for security reasons. And I assume that this is one of the like is one of those things. This code sign is that you can get a certificate from an authority, which makes it less likely that like, it makes the your executable more trustworthy because Windows is gonna be more likely or it's not gonna have as many barriers to run that executable because it has the certificate. I think that's what's how it works, and it's very similar for drivers as well. So Linux doesn't have these things, and I think for that reason is simpler. I think for most of them, it's gonna the main ones that are gonna be very different are gonna be the Android, iOS, and web, obviously. But I think I'm just gonna briefly look. So I'm gonna do the system first. Once I close the system, then I'm gonna briefly look into the other builds to see how different they are, and then I can think about. I don't think it's gonna change many things to be honest, because I can always just put other functions there. So it's gonna be basically. I think I should focus on Windows and Linux first. But this is gonna be very boring, so I think it's not gonna like it doesn't. It's better to use two monitors and just manually copy everything. Then once I get to the point, because I already spent too much time here, because I think that this part's gonna be the one that is kind of interesting, just figuring out how to translate the nodes, and it's gonna be the more difficult part. I think it's gonna take too much time if I try to do everything now, since I already spent a bunch of time here. I think this class doesn't matter as well, just for the GUI, this thing here. It's gonna manage the GUI, so I'm gonna delete this one. Obviously, I'm gonna delete all the other ones as well. So these ones. Yeah. Hmm. See something. Yeah, I'm gonna stop here. So I'm gonna do this. It's gonna be. I'm gonna do this other part. Maybe I'll stream the other parts after. So just get all the variables needed for setting the export presets from this editor export classes. Put them on the struct there. Then the other parts is just to copy the functions that are used on this pipeline, which is the other parts of the. After you have the presets, you click on the export project. It's gonna be this flow here, functions, or this one. So copy these functions here into the file. Maybe I'll put on another. I think I'm gonna put on the same file. So destruct and these functions. Then after that, compare. Spend more time on the ones that are from the derived classes to see like what exactly is the difference between them, because both Windows and Linux are gonna use the editor exports platform PC, which has the main functions that are used to write to the file. So see if there's anything that matters a lot on them. And if there is, I think probably the best strategy is to put them on the same function and then just create another like a variable. Or I can create I'm gonna create an enum. Enum is probably the best. So I create an enum that separates based on platform, and then instead of using the classes, I just use the enum to determine to differentiate between them if I need to do that. So once I have all the functions, then I'm gonna try to remove as many things as possible that I don't think I'm gonna need. And then I'm gonna focus on this part here, which is gonna be the hardest part, which is to figure out how to take the root nodes of the scene, which I'm creating from C++. So basically create, I'm using this as an example. I'm gonna probably like, because I didn't develop any project that has more than one scene, but this is supposed to be the root of the scene. So I'm probably gonna call a function from the export system from here and pass the root as an argument. Then figure out how to translate that root nodes from the scene and all, like the root nodes get the resources, all the resources that I need are needed, and write everything that is needed into the final executable file. That's gonna be the hardest part. Then once I try to like, I'm gonna try to build first, and I think I'm gonna use ChatGPT as well. So like just search for the functions on Godot that I can potentially use to, which is probably gonna be class DB, class DB and property info, class DB, property info, and method bind. I think those are the three main classes that have functions that allow you to parse the classes. So basically, also the resource saver. So I think I'm gonna look for the resource saver and resource loader functions, which are the functions that they use to translate the information from the nodes into files, and also the package scene. So by looking into those functions and how they translate the information into the scene files, I'm gonna try to write the information directly to the final executable. Then once I have like the initial thing, I'm gonna try to run everything. So basically run from the command line and build the whole thing from C++. So build the roots, save to the exported, and then I'm gonna put on this path here. I think I'm gonna put it final executables on this predetermined thing here. Then once I get that, I'm gonna try to run, and then I'm gonna just keep iterating to see until I get like a good baseline for our system. I'm not really sure if I'm gonna stream this, but yeah. If I don't stream this, then probably the next time that I stream, I'm going to continue to review the hardware study resources and other study resources that I have. But I think I might, after I'm done with the boring parts, might come back and some other day to try to figure out how to translate the root node into the right into the final executable. So see you next time.